Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that is quite literally a game changer for how we think about compliance. When most of us hear the words ISO audit, we immediately picture this incredibly dusty checklist shoved into a binder on some back office shelf, right? But when we look at the framework for an ISO 420001 AI audit program, that old school mindset just absolutely does not fit anymore. As it turns out, an AI audit program is way more like a living, breathing technological architecture. So we're going to explore how it operates as this highly dynamic system, one that requires active monitoring, continuous diagnostics, and iterative upgrades just to keep pace with how incredibly fast AI itself is evolving. Here's our system boot sequence for today. First, baseline architecture. Second, active diagnostics. Third, iterative patching. Fourth, network sync. And finally, number 5, the simulation. All right, let's jump right into section 1. Baseline architecture, establishing the audit protocol. Okay, before we start running system diagnostics, we really have to establish what an audit program actually is. And the absolutely crucial distinction to make here is understanding the difference between an individual audit and an audit program. Basically, an individual audit is just a single event. It's a snapshot. It has very specific objectives, lasts maybe a few days or weeks, and gives you a single report. But the audit program? That's the entire governance system. It's the whole shebang. It encompasses multiple audits orchestrated over a 1 to 3 years certification cycle to guarantee ongoing compliance. It requires serious long-term resource management, budgeting, and trend analysis across all those individual audits. You aren't just managing a single point in time here. You are managing a continuous timeline. Moving on to Section 2, Active Diagnostics, Monitoring Program Performance. Now that we've got our baseline set, this is where things get really interesting. We get to start reading the system telemetry. Think of this as the dashboard for our entire program. To actually know if our program is doing what it's supposed to do, we absolutely must monitor and evaluate its performance using key performance indicators, or KPIs, against very specific targets. For example, are we actually executing the audits we plan to do? Well, we need 100% audit plan completion. When we find a nonconformity, an NC, are people actually going in and fixing it? We want to see a greater than 90% NC closure rate within 90 days. We also have to track audit days variance to make sure our budgeting is on track. We watch auditor utilization to ensure we're deploying our human resources efficiently, usually aiming for that sweet spot around 70 to 80%. And, of course, auditee satisfaction, so the whole process stays constructive. This is literally the critical diagnostic data you need to evaluate if your audit program objectives are actually being met. Which naturally brings us to the ultimate question any external auditor is absolutely going to ask you: show me the last audit program performance review. What decisions were made based on the data? Look, tracking KPIs is completely useless unless that data directly triggers management decisions. If your auditor utilization is running too high, guess what? It means your team is burning out and you need to hire. If your NC closure rate is low, it means your corrective action process is failing. The data absolutely must drive action. Section 3. Iterative patching, continuous audit improvement. So when our active diagnostics reveal a bug, maybe an inefficiency or a changing risk in our AI environment, we have to deploy a system update. In ISO terms, we apply continuous improvement to the audit process. The core algorithm for continuously patching and upgrading our framework is the classic PDCA cycle: plan, do, check, act. First, we plan. That means reviewing our program objectives, our risks, and our resources. Then we do, which is literally executing the scheduled audits. Next up, we check by analyzing all those KPIs and feedback trends we just talked about. And finally, we act by implementing actual improvements, like, say, revising procedures or adding new training. This feedback loop is exactly what ensures our audit program never becomes obsolete. And this list brilliantly illustrates exactly how that act phase works in the real world. These are the specific triggers that force a continuous update to your program. Say you notice a crazy high nonconformity rate in a very specific clause, well, that triggers a schedule adjustment. You clearly need to audit that area more frequently. If you identify competence gaps on your team regarding some brand new AI models, that triggers new training. If the ISO 42001 standard itself gets revised, which is always everyone's favorite day, right? That triggers an immediate gap analysis. Or, hey, maybe travel costs are just eating your entire budget alive. You patch the system by adopting remote auditing technologies. The point is, the program dynamically adapts. So, you really have to stop and ask yourself, how does your audit program adapt to changes in ISO 42001 or shifts in organizational risk? Honestly, if your company decides to deploy a massive new generative AI tool tomorrow, your risk landscape fundamentally changes overnight. You absolutely cannot rely on some static legacy audit schedule that you designed a year ago. Your audit program must be risk-based and agile enough to pivot on a dime. Which takes us to Section 4, Network Sync, integrating AI audits with existing standards. We really don't want our ISO 42001 framework just operating out there in a silo. Most mature organizations already have existing management standards in place. And when you look at it, it's actually beautiful how seamlessly AI intersects with them. For instance, ISO 9001 for quality shares foundational clauses around leadership and continuous improvement. ISO 27001 for information security is massively intertwined with AI, sharing vital clauses around risk assessment and data controls. And ISO 14001 for environmental management. Suddenly, that's critical. Did you know that training a single AI model can emit as much carbon as 5 cars over their entire lifetimes? Crazy, right? But by mapping these shared clauses, we can seamlessly integrate our AI audits with ISO 9001, 27001, and 1401. Ultimately, the benefit of this network sync is so simple, yet incredibly powerful. One audit, multiple standards, lower costs. Integrating these standards drastically cuts down the number of audit days required. It guarantees consistent findings because you're using the exact same evidence to support multiple clauses across totally different standards. But maybe most importantly, it eliminates audit fatigue for your teams. They finally get some relief from feeling like they are just constantly under the microscope. Section 5, the simulation global bank use case. Let's put all this theory into practice. We're going to run a quick simulation of a multi-site global bank auditing its varied AI systems. Think of this as a real-world puzzle we get to solve. Look at how dynamic the resource allocation is here based purely on risk levels. Up top in the US HQ, they're dealing with high-risk AI, like credit scoring and fraud detection. Because of that, the audit frequency is biannual, using a mix of on-site and remote methods, and it requires highly technical lead auditors. Meanwhile, you look at the Singapore office, and they are only running a low-risk customer service chatbot. That just requires an annual, fully remote audit. The UK is medium risk for trading algorithms, and India is medium risk for HR recruitment AI. The key takeaway here is that the program manager allocates budget, time, and specific expertise precisely where the risk dictates. Okay, now let's look at our active diagnostics after year 1 of this global bank's program. And right away, our telemetry tells us we've got a problem. The schedule completion was only 95%, so we actually missed our 100% target. And the nonconformity closure rate was at 85%, meaning we missed our 90% target there too. Auditor utilization did hit the sweet spot at 80%, but clearly the system experienced some real failures in its first year that we have to address. But remember our PDCA cycle? A missed KPI isn't a disaster, it's just a diagnostic trigger. We do a root cause analysis and find out the schedule completion failed because the on-site audit in India got delayed due to visa issues. So what do? We act. The system patch deployed is to formally add a remote audit option as a backup contingency for international sites. And the impact? A perfect 100% schedule completion in year 2. That right there is continuous improvement in action. And that brings us to system shutdown final takeaways. We're reaching the end of our cycle today, so here is your core checkpoint. Remember, an audit program is a long-term strategy covering a 1 to 3 year certification cycle, not just a single isolated event. All your resources, human, financial, technological, must be planned at the macro program level. Active KPI monitoring and evaluation is exactly what drives your annual reviews and makes those essential continuous improvements possible. And networking your AI audits with existing standards like ISO 9001, 27001, and 14001 is hands down the smartest, most efficient way to reduce duplication and save your company money. I'll leave you with this final thought. AI models are learning, updating, and evolving by the exact second. They do not sit still. So, as you look at your own organization's compliance framework, is your audit program learning fast enough to keep up? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep optimizing, keep updating, and I'll catch you in the next one.